This video is sponsored by Overwolf. Spawning Tool is an app that allows you to overlay your StarCraft 2 games with a build order advisor. It automatically appears in-game after installation and helps you pick and execute a build order in multiplayer and in co-op. I personally use the app to quickly learn about build orders pro gamers recently played in tournaments. Click the link in the description to get this app for free. Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome back to another StarCraft video. Now today, it is time to talk nerdy once again. Today, we're gonna discuss the Zerg versus Protoss matchup in the new multiplayer balance patch now that we are a couple of weeks into it. I wanna discuss my current stance on it, where I feel like I'm playing well, but more importantly, where I feel like I could use some improvement. So here's the thing, my Zerg versus Terran and my Zerg versus Zerg feel really good. I feel like I'm currently, I play on a couple different accounts on a few different servers, but I think I'm currently right around 65% win rate or so, and I feel really strong in both Zerg versus Terran as well as Zerg versus Zerg. Now, statistically speaking, there is no denying that my ZvP is just simply my worst matchup. I mean, I don't want it to be, I've been trying to improve in it, but it's very difficult. It's hard to really pinpoint exactly why it is that I am currently struggling a little in this matchup. It could either be due to the new multiplayer balance patch or because of the fact that I am facing higher level opponents, as in general I have been climbing up on the ladder over the last couple of weeks pretty solidly. So in this particular game, I am going up against Nera. I don't think we've ever played a game before. He's a 5.8k Protoss player, and I think at the time of us playing, he was the rank 120 Grandmaster on the European server, that is. So I'm definitely going up against a strong opponent. And I figured in this game, you know what, I'm just gonna play as passive as I possibly can. I played this a couple days ago over at the live stream, and I actually just got done watching a Sue replay. I watched the game, I think, between Sue and Stats, where Sue decided to play extremely passive as well. And basically, that was the kind of strategy that I decided to practice that day too. Now, in general, there's a couple of different ways that Zerg versus Protoss happens. If it's a more passive, laid-back macro game, like this one will be, overall, I am in my comfort zone. I feel really solid when I get to play my strategy, the one that I wanted to play, the one that I set out to play, and when Protoss players go for the quote-unquote standard bits of aggression. So they go for like 1 or 2 adepts early, then they transition into a Phoenix, into an Oracle, maybe into Archon drops, and then into like Storm, as well as Archon Immortal Zealot, right? That's like kind of like what we call the gold standard right now in Zerg versus Protoss. And in those kind of games, I feel very good in Zerg versus Protoss. However, I would say in probably like, I don't know, maybe a little over half the games, at least my opponents play something a little bit weird. And I think we've probably all experienced this on the ladder once upon a time at the very least. When your opponent plays weird and you're not entirely sure what exactly is going on, oftentimes you can be caught with your pants down and you can just simply lose the game. So in my case, it's like 8 gate, 2 base charge lot all in, or like 7 gate adepts with their glaive upgrade all in, or like little bits of aggression here and there that just simply throw me off of the game that I had planned, and therefore I end up losing it. And I've been trying to work on my scouting. I've been trying to figure out what kind of build they're going for. And by the way, this was a nice little push here by Nera. He decided to go after one drone. I wanted to morph in the Spore Crawler on the second one. He assumed that I was already gonna morph that in as well, so he started hitting a third one. Anyways, nice little bit of aggression there. But what I'm trying to say is that if my opponent plays a normal game, I'm feeling good. But in a lot of the games where my opponent plays a little bit more aggressive, or maybe something that is not considered to be standard, I feel myself losing quite regularly. So I just want to pause the game for a little bit. And this is kind of like an important moment. I know a lot of you don't like it when I pause, but let me try and explain the situation we are in right now. So in this game, I decided to go hatch gas pool. I made 4 Zerglings early on. I did go for the quick third base as well. Decided to go for the third queen as a follow-up. And now that link speed is done, I'm adding drones back into the gas. And I'm getting myself a couple of spores after scouting here with the Overlord that my opponent is going for that Stargate. So pretty normal opener here, all things considered. Now, from here on out, there's a couple of ways that Protoss can take this game. And that's kind of that's kind of where I feel like I'm struggling the most. So in this case, my opponent decides to play very, very normal, and he goes for like, I think like a 5-minute third base, and he transitions into Archon drops. However, this is the point in the game where I personally feel most vulnerable. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section. I'm always, you know, trying to see if there's maybe some help here and there. But regardless, this is kind of the point where I'm a little bit on the fence, right? So I'm trying to figure out what structure that was right there in the back. There's a gateway at the front. I want to make sure that I see what structure right there was in the back, and I will be able to find out. I believe that's the robo. There we go. Robotics facility indeed has been planted down as well. So in this case, I know for almost certain that my opponent is going to go for the Archon drop follow-up after the Stargate play here as well. If it's the Archon drops, I'm expecting the third base to go up right around the 5-minute mark. Do get the kill right there on the Oracle, which is nice. The Queen from the Natural ended up coming up as well. But regardless, if I see now a third base going down at the 5-minute mark, I'm feeling good. However, in a lot of the games, this is where the Protoss transitions towards something a little bit unorthodox. A lot of the times they will follow it up, for example, with really quick charge, like 8-gate Zealot. They will transition maybe to Archon drops, but then they still have a lot of gateways on the back of it as well, and they decide to do a big warp in with the Archons as well. And it's like these interesting, relatively small varieties in the build that make it difficult. So right now, right? I know that in a normal game, Protoss, when they go Stargate into Archon drops, will plant down the third at the 5-minute mark. Right now, we're 5 minutes and 20 seconds into it. There's a couple assumptions I can make. Either this is because my opponent is just simply not playing very on point, or he's using those 20 seconds or so to plant down additional gateways, or maybe some additional tech, or maybe an additional upgrade that he started up earlier, and therefore his Nexus, his third base is delayed, and I have to respond to that. It's like a very subtle balance between the amount of drones that you can produce and the amount of units you want to make in order to deal with this. Now, I do see that the Warp Prism was moving across. In this case, it is just simply that my opponent was a little bit delayed. He may have just squeezed out a couple additional units here before this aggression. So in this case, he did get the charge load upgrade going relatively early, so that kind of delays it. But I'm hoping I'm making it clear the reason why sometimes I get caught off guard, because you want to make as many drones as you possibly can, but obviously if you lose the game while droning, it doesn't really work. But if you don't get enough drones, you lose at a later stage because your army is just simply not big enough. So it's like a slippery slope in between, or it's like a slippery slope where you want to make as many drones as possible, but you don't want to make too many. And that's what I'm working on right now. Now, I think one of the improvements I could make here quite easily, and this is one of the things that I noticed from the Sioux game. We can have a look at that one in just a little bit as well, if you like to. This is one of the things that I noticed a lot of the pro gamers do. They focus heavily on that overseer scouting as well. You can see right here, for me, that's kind of non-existent. I am not entirely sure currently as to when I should get my Overlord speed, when I should afford that, and when I should really start scouting more heavily for that kind of tech. Maybe there's like timings I should know, right? For example, I saw the timing right there of the robotics facility. Maybe me seeing that it's not done yet at like, I don't know, 4 minutes and 30 seconds should already be a giveaway. It's a little difficult to know those kind of timings precisely, but that is kind of where I mostly struggle. Now in this game, I wanted to go for that really quick Stargate, or rather not Stargate, sorry, Spire play, where I go for the really rapid Brood Lords as well. So my plan was to go for the 6-minute Hydro Den as well as the Evo Chamber. So I go 6-minute Hydro Den and Evo Chamber, and I go for a 4th base shortly afterwards as well. And then right around the 7-minute mark is when I put down the Infestation Pit and we transition towards the Hive. Now, I know that most pro gamers don't really time their structures past like the 5-minute mark very clearly whatsoever. They will mostly play feeling-based or maybe like saturation-based. So, for example, I say right here, hey, I'm going to get the Infestation Pit at the 7-minute mark, but there's a good chance that a lot of pros will look at this and be like, hey, when I finish my, I don't know, 3-base saturation is when I put down the Infestation Pit. It's very likely that a lot of pros do not play that way. I always really like using the in-game clock for those kind of timings, but In this case, though, we are set up for a really nice, standard, laid-back macro game where I kind of know what my opponent is doing. But that's the key here, right? I say I kind of know what my opponent is doing. There's a couple things where I feel like I could work on it, right? So there's a couple things I feel like I can work on. So first off, there's obviously the scouting. I think the scouting could be quite a little bit better here, for example, with Overseers. We'll have a look at the game that I'm referencing here from Sue after this match. So I can look at how he managed to scout as well. Secondly, I also feel like I might be playing just a little bit too passively. And then lastly, I think I might want to also figure out what kind of unit composition my opponent is going for at this point. Sure, I've just now scouted there was an Immortal there, and I know that there's a chance my opponent is, you know, going into, for example, Disruptors, or maybe he's going into, I don't know, I've even seen players play Colossus. At this point, I don't really know that kind of thing, right? So I would like to know how I can scout out a little bit easier what exactly is going on here. Now, my opponent is pushing right before my Great Aspire is done, which is a really good timing by him, obviously. So here's my Hive finishing up. I'm gonna be morphing in the Great Aspire here in just a little bit. But this is also the moment at which my opponent decides to push forward. So I think up to this point, right, considering my opponent is playing a normal game, everything has been going really quite smoothly. But for example, right now, should I go for some counterattacks? Am I playing a little bit too passively? Or do you think this is fine? It's kind of difficult to say, because if I send too much army across here, it feels like I'm sort of leaving my bases really exposed and very vulnerable if he does decide to commit to like another warp in and then a really big push too. Anyway, Great Aspire is now coming up. I'm starting up some of my Corruptor production here as well. And I want to morph in ideally about 8 or so Brood Lords at once. That's what I noticed Serral do against Stats at the BlizzCon Grand Finals, where he basically got himself those gases for the 4th base really quite early on. I, by the way, catch a couple Zealots over here that I know are headed for my bases. But anyways, I noticed, for example, Serral versus Stats in the BlizzCon Grand Finals go for 9 Brood Lords, if I'm not mistaken. And I think like 8 or 9 is probably the amount you should be able to get out roughly like 10.5 minutes or so into the game if you play it properly. But it's kind of difficult to commit too many resources right here as well to Corruptors if your opponent is just about to hit you in the face with that big army, right? So right now, this is kind of like the moment at which I feel pretty vulnerable as well. Now, in contrast, in ZvT and in ZvZ, I kind of can judge a little bit better, and maybe it's just, once again, practice, right? But I can judge a little bit better the position that I'm in. I feel a little bit more solid, I think, all around, as I know roughly what my opponent can be having at a certain amount of time, and what kind of pushes I should be expecting as well. Whereas I feel like with Protoss, sometimes they posture out on the map like this guy did, where he just simply made, you know, a whole lot of units, and then he pushed across, and he never actually committed to any aggression. It's like a difficult thing to judge for me, and I never really know exactly how many units I can commit to defending and how many I should use for counterattacking, and, you know, whether or not I'm fine. Anyway, at this point, my Brood Lords are out, and this is also the moment at which my opponent finally manages to commit to. I'm sending a small hit squad right there of Hydralisk towards my 4th base. I'm trying to make sure that I get that one defended, of course. I do end up losing, I think, a couple drones here, but it's nothing all too crazy. And now that the Broods are out, I can go for a big push across the map. Now, in the games that we saw Serral once again play against Stats in the BlizzCon Grand Finals, Serral actually got the Brood Lords out, but he then decided to play really defensively. I guess that may have been due to the fact that Stats was already responding to it as well. And in this case, you can already see that the Tempests are being queued up. Now, Tempests are quite a bit different than they once were back in the day. They are now much quicker, but they're also much more vulnerable. They're a very different unit, all things considered. And I figured, you know what? I've got these Hydras. Now, the Hydras, of course, they ended up losing 10% attack speed, which is one of the reasons as well why I'm playing a lot more passive and why I'm playing a lot more laid back. It kind of feels like if you go for a timing attack, Protoss just has enough units to deal with it. Whereas in the past, you would maybe have like 20 Hydras. Right now, you're gonna have effectively still 20 Hydras, but the actual damage output is more the equivalent of like 18 or so Hydras. And yeah, it just kind of forces me into this much more passive way of playing. Anyway. I do really like this strategy though. Going for the very laid-back style, just simply defending against everything that Protoss is trying to throw at you, and then eventually overwhelming them with sheer amounts of numbers. I have been really enjoying that. Now in this case, I've got a Corruptor flying around my base as well, trying to figure out if there's maybe like a War Prism hanging out somewhere. And I'm also using my reinforcing units as well as my queens now to clean up the couple zealots that are being a nuisance here. But the real damage, obviously, is being done right here on the other side of the map. I'm trying to fight my opponent right on top of his bases. That way, my Brood Lords can use the high grounds as opposed to really get as much value as possible. While pushing out, I also got myself that 5th base. And while I'm killing my opponent's 4th, I have noticed, hey, there's another command, or another nexus, rather, on top of that high ground. Now, you can see here where his units spawn in from, right? And at this point, now that the zealots have been cleaned up, I'm also using the all army hotkey liberally to send in all of my other units from the other side of the map. They're the ones that are coming up right now. That's a lot of Corruptors, a lot of Hydras as well. And as long as I can intercept most of these Tempests from joining the battle and from flying in, I think I'm in a good spot. So, if a game goes really solidly, and when it's really quote-unquote standard, I feel excellent in Zerg vs Protoss. However, I feel like I am in trouble if my opponent decides to play something more unorthodox when they go for like 2-base 8-gate Zealot, when they go for like 2-base 7-gate Adept, or when they just simply decide to play something that is not considered to be normal in the current meta of SC2. And I would like to work more on that. And I think one of the key elements of me improving in that sense is scouting. Alrighty, so this is the replay that I was just referencing. In this game, Su also decides to rush straight up to Brood Lords. Now, I'm curious to see as to how he manages to scout whether or not it is safe for him to do so. I know that the 3rd base timing, once again, is usually a really big indication as to whether or not you're safe to continue droning as well, because I usually feel like that's like kind of the moment where I'm struggling the most and where, you know, most of the time you have that big deviation from Protoss. But I just want to cruise through this game at probably maximum speed for a little bit until we arrive at like, I don't know, I would say like the 4-minute mark or so we can see how Su figures out roughly what is going on. So he scouts in this game that it is indeed going to be a Stargate opener. And at this point, the Oracle is going to follow up that Phoenix as well to try and see if it can deal a little bit of damage. Now, obviously, one of the reasons maybe why Su decides to play so passive is because of this map. This map in general is not very Zerg friendly, and I think a lot of people realize that as well. Only a single drone kill there in total, but here are these Zerglings. Now notice this is right around the 5-minute mark, and Su is expecting his opponent to grab it there as well. He sees the probe moving over, so it's a clear indication that everything is A-okay to go from here. Now, I would say the first couple minutes in the game, I feel good at, okay? Up to this point, if I see everything going down at the normal time, this is where I feel pretty solid. I'm just curious to see whether or not Su decides to continue scouting here a little bit more heavily, and if there's like one main thing that he changes up here in order to be safe against the imminent Archon drops. So he confirms the 3rd once again. He knows now that the Archon drops are coming in. There's a couple queens already waiting. Roaches are spawning here, and this is the point where he's safe once again to continue droning. So this is pretty similar. Now, how exactly does he decide to go for this kind of push, and when does he figure out more information about the Protoss opponent? Like, where's the big deviation here? Because so far, this looks pretty similar to the situation that I was in. So, he goes for the Hydra Den, and then as well the Evolution Chamber. I would say right around like 3-base saturation at like the 6-minute mark. He also then follows it up with a base right here at the gold. Now, I think he doesn't really care so much that it's a gold base. Instead, he just mostly cares about the fact that he gets the additional gases going. The gases are really critical here. An Overseer did just finish up. Where is that one? Okay, so there's an Overseer around here. Is he going to use that one for scouting right now, or is he going to play more aggressive? Well, I think for the most part, he's just using this as a way of keeping track of where that prism is located. Alright, let's continue speeding up for now. Now, one key thing to note here is that once Su arrived at 3-base saturation, which is roughly 66 drones, This is also the point at which he started making a lot of additional armies. So we see pretty much non-stop unit production after he managed to go up to 3 bases. So that's very solid. We also now do have that infestation pit coming up right around the 7-minute mark. And from there on out, he's going to go straight up to a hive as well as that greater spire. But notice, like, right here, right? I think one of the key differences, and I think this might be one of the things that I want to work on as well, is that he's got units spotting the Protoss 4th base timing. This is actually a big thing. I'm not entirely sure what the normal, quote-unquote, normal time for a 4th base of Protoss would be, but I do think having these spotters out on the map is a big deal. Because right now, and this is another thing actually, he's got vision of pretty much the mid-section of the map, other than like maybe the complete bottom end, but like, you know, no Protoss is going to push all the way through that. I don't think. So I think this is probably a really nice set of units as well, and this is something that I definitely want to incorporate too. So I want to just go back up for a second. When exactly does he send these units all over the map? Because right now, after he gets the 4th base going, he's still using them very much so defensively. But these Zerglings actually aren't even really used for defending against the Archons. So I would probably say right around the same time as he starts stacking up towards that infestation pit. And when he gets the 4th base is also when the Zerglings get spread all over the map. Okay. That's a very nice little bit of information. I'm also curious to see actually, is Su gonna test the waters at all? He might decide to maybe get a little bit aggressive. After maybe he finishes up all of the Hydra upgrades and whatnot as well. Does go straight into +2 missile. Now this is cheeky. An empty Overlord drop. Sure. An empty Overlord drop. Just trying to force these units away. And I actually kind of like this though. So while the empty Overlord drop is going down, we do now see Protoss taking that 4th base. Okay, so this is cool. So the empty Overlords get sent in. I would say 8.5 minutes or so is when this 4th base gets planted down. This is spotted immediately by an Overlord as well as a Zergling. Su also would have known if the gold base was taken here instead, so that's a really nice little bit of information. Then he decides to send in a couple Overlords towards the opposing player's natural, but he pushes with the actual army that he's got towards the 4th base. Now keep in mind, he's doing this while going up to the Brood Lords, right? Like this is him rushing Brood Lords. He's just simply, you know, trying to get some presence out on the map as well. Now stats being a little bit too good for that, he doesn't end up losing the 4th here. But I would say many weaker Protoss players, at the very least like the ones I'm facing, would very likely still end up losing the 4th base there, being completely distracted by the fake Overlord drop. Now, I do like this a lot, right? So, we don't really see any aggressive Overseer scouting, which is kind of what I expected, to be honest. The main difference here that I'm really noticing is that Su decided to go for the 4th a little bit quicker. He got the 5th base up as well. Plus, he scouted when the 4th of the opponent was planted down too. And in this case, it was like the 8.5 minute mark. There's also Overseers. We see little changelings moving across the center of the map too. I guess that might be like a nice addition for him to continue working on this. But here's the Brood Lords coming out right around the 11-minute mark. I think I got mine around the same time as well. I think I started mine at like 10:30 or so. So right around the 11-minute mark. And he just pushes across. And this is one of the cleanest ways of playing. And this is actually another important one, right? So in this case, he decides to send like a small hit squad of units once again towards the 4th. He's forcing this Protoss player into several different angles. Also, another thing that I really want to point out is the spread right here of the Overlords. That's another thing I really need to incorporate too. So if you look right here, all of, like, look at the vision of the Zerg right now. Just look at the mini-map. Like, he's got vision pretty much everywhere. Plus, he's got the Spore Crawlers in really good positions here too. He's got a lot of static defense, actually. Even some Spine Crawlers over here. Ah, okay. So to recap, at 8:30, he saw the 4th base going up. That's when he started setting up for this push. He pushes with the Brood Lords, even sends in the Queens too. The Overlords are spread all over the map, a small hit squad near the bottom. And on the most vulnerable bases where the Zealots could go, he's got some Spine Crawlers, some Pokeboys, set up to get to at least get rid of some Zealots and probably buy some time for maybe some units to come back and defend. He's got some over here as well, which is another vulnerable base. But the bases that are more droppable, this one for example over here is guarded with a Spore Crawler as well as one Corruptor, so a War Prism can't really get in. And then the one in the main, if like a Spore or like if a War Prism decides to like sneak by here, there's 3 oh man, this is nice. Okay. Yep. So it's like, honestly, I expected there to be a bigger difference. But this is all very, very straightforward and something I can definitely work on. So it's still very much so a Brood Lord rush. It's just played in a more efficient manner. Man, those feedbacks are painful. Those queens, man, they saved up their energy for ages. Anyway, you can see right here, the amount of units that Zerg has is just a little bit too much. And eventually, Su does end up playing a little bit better than stats in this particular game. All right, cool stuff. Good work. Okay, I'm very glad that the amount of changes I'm gonna have to make aren't actually that big. They aren't actually that big whatsoever. Very good stuff. Now, I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I know my thoughts can be kind of all over the place. I'm just simply talking through the troubles that I run into in this matchup. And hopefully in the future, I'm going to be able to like make another video like this in like maybe a month or two. And we can compare and see if there's maybe going to be some improvements that I have made ever since. Now, I know that I've been focusing on a lot of the Zerg matchups as well, just because I'm a Zerg player at heart myself. I do want to jump into some more random, probably in the near future as well. So if you would like to see similar content for Terran and Protoss too, do make sure you hit that like button down below, but also let me know down below with a comment section if you would like me to focus on Terran first or maybe on Protoss first. I don't really have a preference. I do play quite a bit of random on the stream. It's just that with the new patch, I've been all over Zerg, man. I've been really enjoying just simply swarming the ladder. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notifications as soon as future videos go live. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile alright. And I will see you once again in the next one.